sometimes when we do our different Bible studies and lessons and whatnot, we end up focusing a lot on what it means to have a relationship with Christ and how that relates to the rest of the world that is around us, how that impacts our society and our day-to-day actions. And every now and then we'll get into some, what I'd call more academic discipleship and whatnot. But sometimes I feel like what gets lost in this whole thing is missing out on what exactly the glory of God means. What I mean by that is that everything about creation is really created to be a display of God's glory. It's really the reason why everything is here. I mean, just put this into perspective of you creating something. I mean, why would you create something? Any of you who have kind of like a creative bent to yourself. If you're somebody who's an artist, you're somebody who writes, you're somebody who's a musician, when you're creating, there's a bit of yourself that you're almost trying to put into this thing that's there. It's not special because you just literally recreated something that somebody else did. I mean, even if you're playing somebody else's song or you're doing some sort of painting that is based on what somebody else has already painted, or you're building something like Legos, it's based on instructions. If it was just a matter of just copying whatever was there in the end product, you could just go out and buy it. The reason why you create is because you imbibe a certain aspect of yourself into that thing. Well, God is the exact same way with creation. He created creation to have this image of Himself overlaid over every single thing we see. And when you start reevaluating everything you see around you by understanding it doesn't exist for my pleasure, but it exists to display God's glory, all of a sudden, a lot of things that maybe we normally say don't make sense, make a lot of sense. What do we mean by that? Well, one of the things I'm going to do is direct you to some of the later chapters in Job. And it's because when you talk about Job, you're really looking as far from human pleasure as humanly possible. It's an individual who had everything you could imagine. He had, influence, he had material wealth, he had good family, and then all of that was taken away from him. And the book of Job is about this individual who never lost his faith, but yet he did start forgetting what things were all about. He started becoming a little bit more concerned with his own circumstances than he was the real thing that should actually be guiding his life. And from a human perspective, you would say that makes sense. If I had everything taken away from me, I would also have a very hard time focusing on the glory of God. But yet, that's where we find our true sense of peace and our true sense of satisfaction. Let me just show you a little bit about what we end up seeing in here. After you have Job talking out and almost questioning God's reason for why He's allowing all these circumstances to befall him, this is what you see God say. This is in chapter 38. Then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind. He said, "Who is this who obscures my counsel with ignorant words? Get ready to answer me like a man. When I question you, you will inform me. Where were you when I established the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who fixed its dimensions? Certainly you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it and supports its foundations? Or who laid its cornerstone while the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God mounted for joy? Who enclosed the sea behind the doors when it burst from the womb? When I made the clouds its garments and thick darkness its blanket? When I determined its boundaries and put its bars and doors in place? When I declared, you may come this far but no further, your proud waves stop here. Have you ever in your life commanded the morning or assigned the dawn its place, so it may seize the edges of the earth and shake the wicked out of it? The earth is changed as clay is by a seal. Its hills stand out. Like the folds of a garment, light is withheld from the wicked, and the arm raised in violence is broken. Have you traveled to the sources of the sea or walked in the depths of the ocean? Have the gates of death been revealed to you? Have you seen the gates of death's shadow? Have you comprehended the extent of the earth? Tell me if you know all of this. Where's the road to the home of light? Do you know where darkness lives so you can lead it back to its border? Are you familiar with the paths to its home? Don't you know? You were already born. You have lived so long. Have you entered the place where the snow is stored? Or have you seen the storehouses of hail, which I hold in reserve for times of trouble, for the day of warfare and battle? What road leads to the place where light is dispersed, where its source of the east wind that spreads across the earth? Who cuts a channel for the flooding rain, or clears the way for lightning to bring rain on an uninhabited land, on a desert with no human life, to satisfy the parched wasteland and cause the grass to sprout? Does the rain have a father? Who fathered the drops of dew? Whose womb did the ice come from? Who gave birth to the frost of heaven, when water becomes as hard as stone and the surface of the watery depths is frozen? I just stopped halfway through chapter 38, but this goes on and on and on. And what you're seeing is God explaining to Job that you're so obsessed with whatever your circumstances are, but who are you to feel entitled to any of this that's around? Have you done any of this? Have you created any of these blessings? Have you done any of these fantastic, miraculous things that you see in this world and this universe and this creation around us? And what I think is almost a little humorous about this is that you end up coming to chapter 40, and then Job ends up almost like saying, like, you're right. I lost focus for a little bit. I forgot that this life is all about you, God. It's not about me. And so he says this in verse 3 of chapter 40. Then Job answered the Lord, I am so insignificant. How can I answer you? I place my hand over my mouth. I have spoken once and I will not reply. Twice, but now I can add nothing. And you would think that maybe God would look at this and go like, oh, okay, he gets the picture. But he doesn't. He says, paraphrasing here, oh no, I have things that you need to hear and you're going to listen to it. That's paraphrasing horribly verse 6. But if we're being honest, it's still more accurate than the Message version. And he ends up saying, get ready to answer me like a man when I question you. You will inform me. Would you really challenge my justice? Would you declare me guilty to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's? Can you thunder with a voice like his? And I think right there, it's that idea that we think we have this idea of what justice is in creation, that we look at the things that we feel entitled to. I feel entitled to comfort. I feel entitled to a life of peace. I feel entitled to health. I feel entitled to recreation. And in all of that entitlement, what we forget is that we have created and been responsible for none of these things that we feel entitled to. All of it belongs to God. And if you're truly going to claim that you believe this individual that is talking here in this book, then you have to re-gear how you think to say, I am entitled to nothing. All that I have, good, bad, or indifferent, is only here by the blessings and the grace and the mercy of God. John 9, there's a story that you're going to read in your small groups where an individual is blind, and the individuals who are around Jesus end up looking at him and saying, for what reason was this man blinded? And this is something that is remarkably relatable for all of us, even if we sit here and go, well, I've never walked around with Jesus. I don't walk around and see, random invalids on the side of the road all the time. But when you look at this, it's relatable because what you see are individuals looking at the world around them and asking God, Jesus Christ, what worldly reason can you give me for this individual to be blind? And Jesus Christ's response is that it's not because of the things of this world. This was permitted to happen so that my glory can be shown through him. And right there, I think that that's something that in our modern world, we think almost sounds like a cruel God. But once you start looking at things outside of our very American, Western, bluntly very privileged way of living today, you start realizing, right, I'm not entitled to anything. I'm not entitled to life. And so if I have something, the only reason why I have anything is because God has permitted me to have that thing. It's because God's glory may be able to be shown through what I have. So if I have something that is good, then I need to praise God because there's some glory that is going to become of God as a result of me having that thing, having that wealth, or having those skills, or whatever it is. If I'm going through a trial, then I can still praise God because that may be a blank canvas for God to paint an image of his glory in my life. That's a really big thought. I would ask you this, what is actually more beneficial to this individual, because this individual, as you'll read, ends up being healed of his blindness. So when this individual looks back at their entire life, what would have actually been of greater joy, of greater contentment and fulfillment in his life? To have had his sight for his life leading up to that point and having never experienced the miraculous touch of God, or to have had to go through this and as a result of this thing be able to metaphorically and quite literally see the face of God in his life as a result of this divine intervention. When you look at the world we live in, the reality is this. For most of human history, going back to the Neolithic period, life expectancy was somewhere between 30 and 40 years. Literally in the last 100 years, it has more than doubled. When you look at literacy rates, in the year 1900, nearly the entire world was illiterate, statistically speaking. Today, worldwide illiteracy is down to 8%. You start looking at what's defined as extreme poverty, and extreme poverty is something that, most individuals also kind of lived in, 100 years ago, but then today it's down to 700 million people, which sounds like a lot until you keep in mind that there's 8.1 billion people in the world. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that whether individuals want to admit it or not, we are so far removed from the harsh realities of this life that nearly all human history has had to experience. And I think in our comfort, we have become lazy. And we have become, once again, that word pops up, entitled. We become entitled to think that God owes me my comfort. God owes me my convenience. And as Christians, we fall into the trap of translating that into how we serve God as individuals and as individuals in a church family, where we end up saying, I am entitled to be able to have my God on my terms the way I want it. And I guess if that's really the way you feel, then I would look at that and say, what exactly did you do to create any of those things that you may feel entitled to today? The whole idea of entitlement is kind of rough because it's something that individuals don't want to hear about. They don't want to hear that they're focused more on their own personal comfort and convenience and pleasure than the things of God. But yet, that is the number one stumbling block to any individual having a healthy relationship with God in our world today. And it's just because those comforts and pleasures and conveniences are so readily apparent. But in our pursuit of those earthly, temporary comforts and conveniences and pleasures, what we end up actually robbing ourselves of is contentment and joy. Contentment and joy that comes from something that is more divine, something that is more lasting than anything that we can create on our own. So I would ask you this, upon what are you creating your contentment and joy? Is it something of your own creation or something that is divine? That's our lesson that I heard for today. I hope you're able to get something out of it. Until we meet again, God bless.